The Comte de Noyon was a wealthy man. He wasn't proud of how he had acquired his wealth, not because he'd inherited it from his father, that didn't worry him at all, but his father's wealth was based on indigo plantations in Martinique. Why would that produce so much wealth? Well, the colour of the French army uniform is blue, and the Franco-Prussian War and the First World War had been very good for the use of indigo, so he was a very wealthy man. He had one great treasure, his son Philippe, and he had one great loss. He'd lost his wife. The other treasure was his art collection, and he had a good eye. He was a connoisseur of art, and he could see who were the best up-and-coming artists, and he had amassed a great collection of Paris art in that period. He was well known and well liked in his estate, and he knew nearly everybody by name. He certainly knew them all of them by sight, and it was his habit to walk round the estate every day. So walking round the estate with his young son, who was 10, 11, 12 at that time, it was winter, he was dressed in his full coat, heavy clothes, and the boys fiddling with a stick at the edge of the icy ornamental pond. You know what's going to happen. Boys, sticks, icy pond, he falls in. The Count has hardly begun to think what to do. His treasured son is in the water, struggling, it's covered in ice, and he's wearing very heavy clothes. And while he's still fiddling with the buttons to take off his great big coat, there's a crunching of gravel behind him, and Gustave, the lower gardener, plunges into the lake and lifts the boy up above his head. There's a great shouting and screaming from the house, and maids and all sorts of people rush out to collect the boy and take them back. And of course Gustave disappears. Now Gustave was the least respected by the others. He was the lowest of the under-gardeners. He got the most awful jobs, washing the pots, moving manure, cleaning the ditches, maintaining the fountain, all the messy, dirty jobs. The fellows thought he was slow, dull-witted. In our enlightened times we might say he was on the autistic spectrum. But he preferred to work alone, and that's what he did. Of course, the Count went to the cottage of Gustave the very next day and offered him a generous reward. Gustave refused it. He said, "All I would like, sir, is a 100-franc note, but it must be a new one." Now, if you remember the 100-franc notes, they were very beautiful. They were works of art in their own right. And so a new 100-franc note was duly presented to Gustave, who had it framed and hung on the wall. This seemed very odd, but then he was regarded as an odd person. The years passed, and sensing another war was due, the Comte had his art collection shipped to Martinique. This was a wise precaution, as nearly all of his factories and assets were destroyed in the Second World War. But his greatest loss was the loss of his son, Philippe. When some sort of calm had descended, a family friend, who himself was an artist of a kind, said, "It's not a very good portrait, but it's the best I can do." And the Count looked at the portrait of his young son, and it did indeed catch the vivacity and sparkle of the boy. It wasn't a good painting, but it was a portrait, and he treasured it. Eventually, of course, the Count died, and all of Paris was keen for the great auction to be held. Well, the art treasures were committed to the house of Trajan, which is a prestigious auction house in Monte Carlo. And all the great and good, so they call themselves, had collected for the auction. The starlets from Hollywood, the émigré Russian princes and princesses, the royalty of Monaco and various other places. They were all there, pressing and waiting. The catalogue was illustrated lavishly. It was beautifully prepared. Item 1, portrait of a boy by unknown artist. There was mutterings in the crowd. Why was this rubbish been put up? We're waiting for the Picassos, the great Impressionist works. Who'll bid me 1,000 francs? Nothing. We're not interested. Get on with it. Get rid of this. The auctioneer's anxious to get on. 500 then. Come on. The whole room is seething with impatience. Any bid? And from the back of the room, a quiet voice says, 100 francs. Speak up! 100 francs, he shouts. Sold to Gustave the gardener. At that point, the auctioneer says, and now that is the business finished for the day. Well, there's consternation. There are people waving catalogues. There are people trying to press forward and demand that the auction continues. Eventually, calm is restored and the lawyer steps forward. He said, under the terms of the Count's will, he decreed that anybody who bought this painting would inherit the whole estate.